Today we begin our quest to complete the Pentagon Challenge. But what does that exactly mean? Let me explain. Because this is arguably the hardest challenge to complete on Football Manager. And that's because you have to win the 5 different Champions League trophies across 5 different confederations around the world. All while starting unemployed with 0 coaching badges and Sunday League experience. Which is why the Pentagon Challenge is known as the Ultimate Football Manager Challenge. So let's begin. So to kick things off, I thought without all the qualifications and experience, I need to find advantages in other ways. So I made my Sunday League manager bold, just like all the best managers in the world. Of course, I have loaded leagues from all 5 continents, including the lower divisions, to give us the best chance at the start, which as you can see opens up a phenomenal amount of teams around the world that are looking for a manager for their club. But I'm just happy to apply to all. And this next part is the hardest of the Pentagon Challenge: obtaining the first job. And although there are plenty of rejections, our first invite for an interview arrives from a club in the Tunisian 3rd Division. However, it seems like I'm going to be very busy because the number of interviews that come through are enormous. And this honestly took me close to an hour to go through each individual interview. But soon after, there were a lot of teams approached me to become the manager of their club, and as well as other job interviews. So I assessed them all, and the offer I finally accepted was a role in Egypt. Asyut Petroleum, a club in the 2nd tier of Egypt, willing to take a chance on me as their new manager. And literally one of the first things I did was optimistically ask them to pay for a first coaching badge for me. But unfortunately, they rejected, which left me still very underqualified. I had bigger problems, however, because I only had 3 contracting players, with the best being fortunately a very good striker. And right now, there's no money at the club or anything in the transfer budget or wages to sign anybody new. Despite all of this, the club is still predicted to finish mid-table and currently exceeding that in 6th position. So let's see how we do our first job in the Pentagon Challenge. Well, we actually did really well and took the club to a 4th place finish. However, this is way off top spot. And with only 1 guaranteed promotion spot, this is going to be very difficult to manage to get out of this division. There are a lot of jobs popping up elsewhere around the world, but nothing that is quite grabbing my attention just yet. Plus, they are literally going to pay for my first ever coaching badge, so I might as well stick around. Before the next season started, however, I had a huge job on my hands. Because once all the loan players returned, it left me with just 4 players, including one who's absolutely awful and a 37-year-old goalkeeper. So with recruitment being very important, I started to hunt down some new talents to help us achieve promotion this season. Included a new star striker from Argentina who, as a free transfer and only on £170 per week, is an absolute steal. And so after a lot of hard work in the transfer window, we finally have a squad big enough to field a full team and some substitutes and even some reserves. And yes, we've had to really lean into the loan market again to find better quality players, but our best players are actually our own, including the 2 strikers and the center attacking midfielder who could do wonders for us from Brazil. We are playing a 4-4-2 narrow diamond, which has been working quite well for us at the start of the season so far. We're currently in 5th place, but at the start here, we didn't really have a lot of players. So I kind of understand why we were getting beaten. It wasn't until around about here where we actually started fielding a fully strength side. So let's crack on then with season number 2 in our attempt to gain promotion to the top flight. Well, from September we went on a lovely unbeaten run until the defeat in the 5th round of the Egyptian Cup, and that has seen us shot up in the league to 2nd place and chasing the leaders. More good news as well, as the club are covering the £500 to pay for the next coaching badge, the National B licence. And just look at that attribute growth already. Our confidence was high as we actually beat the team sat top of the league 4-0. However, we could be in with a bit of a showdown with them, as the next fixture we have against them is the last game of the season, and right now there's just a point between the 2 of us. Our recruitment though was way too good, and our striker was scoring world-class goals just for fun. And we tore through the fixtures with ease, and with just 2 games left, we were top of the league table by 6 points, needing just 1 point to clinch promotion. But we went slightly more emphatic and we won the next game 8-0 instead, becoming champions of the 2nd division in Egypt with a game to go, with both of our strikers scoring above 30 goals this season. And as much as we dominated that 2nd division, I don't think the same is going to happen in the 1st division because they have very strict rules. You see, promotion from the Egyptian 2nd division takes you into the top division in Egypt, where the likes of Pyramids, Al Ali and Zamalek are, which are teams you've probably heard of. But the rules in this league we're going to struggle with, because you can only play a maximum of 4 foreign players in your starting 11. And if you take a look at our squad by nation, yeah, we've got a lot of Egyptian players, but our best players, they aren't Egyptian. So to keep hold of these players is going to be vital, but we can only play 4 of them in our starting 11 or in our matchday squad. The rest of them have to be Egyptian. And if you go, again, by our best players, the ones that are Egyptian, they're only on loan. And so that leaves us with a lot to think about on whether we stay with Asiat Petroleum or try to move to another club. After all, we have to think about the Pentagon Challenge first and foremost. Will staying at Asiat Petroleum help us achieve our goals quicker, or would it be better to try and find a club with a better setup for us to go to and go on and win the Champions League? But that obviously depends on our qualifications and reputation as well. Because despite winning the league in just 2 years, we don't have the best attribute to go with our very small CV. However, on the jobs list, looking for a new manager is one of the biggest African clubs around from Morocco, Wydad Athletic Club, who fired their manager after missing out on the title by a point. So I did indeed apply. This club has already won 4 African Champions Leagues in their history. In fact, they are the current title holders just before ES Tunis just lifted it this season against the Egyptian side, Al Ali. But the likelihood of a club like that taking a chance on us this early on is very slim. I was correct, and they very gracefully rejected me, as well as another club with a higher reputation. So it seems like we're not quite there yet in terms of the best teams in Africa, but I think it just takes obviously a little bit more time and experience and maybe overachieving with the club that we're at, or maybe a club on a lesser level before we get to that point. Speaking of clubs at a lesser level, there are some other jobs that we can apply for and have done. Like with the Egyptian club Farco, who are already in the top division, but again are concerned about the lack of experience I currently possess. And that interview proved unsuccessful as well, so I guess we're just gonna stay put right now. See what happens. Can we survive in the top division of Egypt in this 3rd season? Well, if we are going to stay, we might as well gain more coaching badges. However, this time round, they aren't as willing, until I managed to convince the club that this is really important, and they finally agree. The transfer window, though, was full of surprises, including signing an excellent Egyptian midfielder from Hoffenheim called Kambala. And with us being knocked out of the Egyptian Cup early, we can just solely focus on the league this season and surviving, which does have us actually predicted to do so in 13th place. However, another thing that I didn't anticipate to be such a problem is going to be qualifying for the African Champions League. By the looks of it, you have to win the Egyptian League to qualify for it, because 2nd place only puts you in the Confederations Cup, and that is depending on the winner of the Egyptian Cup, which we've already been knocked out of. The Confederation Cup obviously is like the Europa League. If you win that one, then yes, you qualify for the Champions League. But just to have one Champions League qualification in a whole league division, which, by the way, is the highest reputation league in Africa, that seems slightly unfair. It does seem like, however, that Egyptian clubs tend to be the favourites of these competitions, because Zamalek from Egypt also actually won the Confederations Cup this season just gone, which means that they now have, or Egypt now have, 2 clubs in the African Champions League playing next season. But for us to do that, we're going to have to survive just this 1st season alone, and with that 4 foreign player rule, it's going to be a lot harder than what I thought. I signed a really good goalkeeper, forgetting that I needed the foreign player rule, and yeah, now we've got loads of foreign players that don't even get into the side, including Galomba if you go by our best 11. But thankfully, I did find a really good secondary striker from Egypt, and he's not amazing. He's just a decent player at this level with good physical attributes, which I found to be what I'm going for. I'm going for players with great physicals to try and hopefully get away from the fact that they're terrible at technical attributes. So let's see if that method of recruitment can help us survive and maybe thrive in the 3rd season at this club. Well, surprisingly, although we really struggled to begin with, we found our feet and went on a nice little unbeaten run to fly up the league table into 5th spot, still some way off 1st place though. However, there's some more good news, because the club accepted my request once again to study for the next coaching badge, and it's the Continental C license, which they have back for me to do so for the next 4 months. And although the form dropped after the winter break at times looked rather worrying as well, we still managed to clinch a very respectable 6th place finish in our first season in the top flight of Egypt. And it's one of our original players, Goma, who has been the star man this season and leading goal scorer, taking the step up in leagues with ease. And that surprise season genuinely makes me curious as to whether we can take this club to the African Champions League with some smart recruitment before next season. Because unlike last season, there's only one club in Africa that kind of looks appealing, but I think I'd rather just stay put. I must admit, it's really starting to sink in the magnitude of this task, as we are nowhere near close to winning one of the 5 Champions Leagues yet. And so if you're in this for the long haul alongside me, then please consider smashing that subscribe button. Let's see if we can get to 150k very soon. Another end of the season, however, and another chance to ask for more coaching badges. And this time, no persuasion was needed, and for the next 6 months, I'll be studying for my Continental B license. What was more important this summer, though, was the recruitment. I needed to get that right if I was to put up any kind of title challenge. So I mainly focused on squad depth, and I brought in as many cheap Egyptian players as I could within my budget and for a cheap wage, mainly transfer listed players from the clubs in my league. I did, however, take a gamble on an out-of-contract South African midfielder who instantly becomes our best player at just 18 years old. This kid could be game-changing for us. And he sits at the top point of our narrow diamond formation, which we are sticking with this season, with Goma and SM up front that can hopefully keep banging in the goals. And yeah, possibly we could have an outside chance of winning the league. The season preview, however, doesn't think this is possible at all. But I'm very determined to prove them all wrong with what I think is a very good squad now. And that seems to be exactly what we were doing as we approached the winter break flying high at the top of the league by 6 points. It also meant that as soon as I could, the board was sending me on a 12-month course of study for my Continental A license. And with those results, we were gaining reputation fast as a manager, which also showed up in our attributes too. However, once again, our form took a dip with 1 point from 4 games going towards the end of the season, and Zamalek took our top spot with 4 games remaining. But a win from behind against Al Masry, followed by a 1-0 win with Mafumolo getting the only goal to put the pressure on. And thanks to a late run in the Champions League, Zamalek dropped points, allowing us to sneak ahead by just 1 point with 2 games remaining. We kept plugging away, and in the next match put in a strong 2-0 away win from home against Pyramids with 2 fantastic goals by our strikers. But Zamalek also won 3-0, meaning the league title will go down to the final game of the season. What we didn't need was to go a goal behind, which is exactly what we did from the penalty spot. However, in the second half, a penalty of our own was dispatched, followed by the 3rd penalty of the game to give us the lead. And with seconds left on the clock, while holding on to our lead, knowing that Zamalek was also winning their game, we finished the race off with a 3rd goal. And with that, we lifted the Egyptian Premier League title, which will guarantee us a spot to qualify for the African Champions League next season, which is the first step in the ultimate goal of completing the Pentagon Challenge. The summer was all about bringing in players for Asiat Petroleum ready for the African Champions League qualifiers. Yes, that's right. Despite us winning the Egyptian Premier League, we still have to go through qualifiers to actually make the group stage. Thankfully, the club that we've got to face in just the preliminary round is Costa del Sol from Mozambique, and I kind of think we should have an advantage there, especially because we've recruited some new Egyptian players I think could really help this side, including Mohamed here, who is a 3.5-star midfielder, really good on the ball as well with 14 passing ability. Sharkia, who is a fantastic centre-back for us, gives us a lot of depth in there too, as well as Kareem Al-Taib, who is a fantastic striker with all 13s and 14s that can hopefully score some more goals for us. And he actually scored the first goal in that qualifying first leg in a game we went on to win 3-0 at home. And we cruised through to the second round of the qualifiers as we won the second leg 2-0. Going on to face Rwandan side Ryan Sports in the next round. But that proved to be an easier tie as we breezed past them 10-2 on aggregate. The groups were then drawn, and winners of the African Champions League last season, Zamalek, who we're all too familiar with, are drawn into our group. Group C, alongside Al Hilal of Sudan and TP Mazembe from Democratic Republic of Congo. Just before our first fixture, which was against Zamalek as well, we have been on a seriously good run in the Egyptian Premier League and currently unbeaten and 4 points ahead of Zamalek, who have had a game in hand. A very interesting offer came through of an interview from Sundowns in South Africa, who last season won the South African League and are currently in the relegation scrap after 12 games. I checked and they failed to qualify for the group stage after being knocked out by the Tunisian champions ES Tunis in the African Champions League, however. So as interesting as that job offer was, of course I didn't entertain it. And so it was time for our first game in the African Champions League group stage, and it's Zamalek, who are the more experienced side, and they take the lead. However, we are there for a reason, and after 15 minutes later, we find ourselves an equaliser and look for sure to be offside, but it was given anyway. So we will take the 1-1 draw for now. The second fixture was away to TP Mazembe, and there was just one goal all game, and thankfully it was scored by our midfielder Ashraf, which gives us 4 points to start things off for us, but Zamalek batter Al Hilal of Sudan 6-0 to take the top spot for now. Meanwhile, the extra competition forced us into a rocky patch, dropping points and allowing Zamalek a chance to strike ahead of us in the league with their game in hand. In positive news, however, the club has paid for us to study for our Continental Pro license. Next up in the Champions League, we head to Sudan to face Al Hilal, and a huge defensive error led to them taking the lead on the 81st minute. And just 2 minutes later, the team that got battered 6-0 by Zamalek go 2-0 up with just 7 minutes left on the clock. So being that we were the favourites to win this tie, we continued to push, and in the 91st minute, striker Assam gave us hope in injury time. And straight from kickoff, we won the ball back immediately and played Assam through on goal to pinch a late equaliser. I feared the worst, however, that put us top of the group as shockingly, Zamalek travelled to TP Mazembe and was defeated 1-0. It was the winter break next, but as we returned, we got our work cut out for us as Zamalek are 5 points clear of us in the Egyptian Premier League. But it was an easy victory for us at home to TP Mazembe in the Champions League. However, our fellow Egyptian opponents in our group also pick up a big win to keep the pressure on, which is something we are failing to do in the league as we lose the game before we play Zamalek in the Champions League, meaning we give them an extended lead at the top now, 8 points. Now, earlier on, I glossed over transfers quite quickly, but I failed to mention arguably the best in the Egyptian midfielder Sam Morsy on a free transfer as he left playing in England for Ipswich. He had a big injury, but now he's back in the side. However, against Zamalek, we were easily the second best in Cairo in the away fixture of the Champions League. We finally got ourselves into the score sheet after we were already 2 goals down, but they were relentless as they always seem to be, and they scored more goals, giving us a 4-1 defeat. And with TP Mazembe getting a good result to the Sudanese side, it meant we need to beat their result on the final fixture to qualify for the knockout stages of the African Champions League. Thankfully though, Assam scored a hat-trick to send us through in second position in Group C after Zamalek topped the group thanks to their 2-0 win. But we were drawn in the quarterfinals against 5-time African Champions League winners ES Tunis, the best club in Tunisia. In the meantime, we dropped 2 more points in the league and Zamalek are just too strong. With their game in hand, they could go 10 points clear from us. The home fixture of the quarterfinals of the Champions League, we managed to scrape a 2-1 lead before heading out to Tunisia for the second leg. And the second leg couldn't have started any better as we give ourselves a 2-goal advantage in 7 minutes. However, ES Tunis weren't giving up and they scored 2 goals either side of half-time, and both of them were just unstoppable strikes. But somehow we dug in, and before extra time loomed for our tired legs, Mohamed Assam scored yet another crucial goal, sending us through to the semi-final. And that sees us go through to face the current Tunisian league leaders CS Sfax, who stand in our way of an African Champions League final. And we really need to make this count because we are dropping more points in the Premier League, including a draw to Zamalek, who are now too far out of our reach to strike for the league title. We will be playing in the Egyptian Cup final, however, as we win in the semi-final and go on to face Pyramids. The first leg of the African Champions League semi-final, however, ended with a 3-3 draw in Tunisia, and that was only thanks to a very late equaliser from our opponents in the 95th minute, but the result still gave us confidence. It was a draw in the other semi-final too, in the clash between Zamalek and Kaizer Chiefs of South Africa. The second leg of the semi-final of the Champions League was very much a back-and-forth encounter, with both teams going all out to try and put themselves in the final through attacking football, with the score being 2-2 at half-time. But the second half was a completely different story, as we finally took control of the fixture, scoring 2 more goals and winning 7-5 on aggregate, giving us an African Champions League final showdown against Zamalek, who's going for back-to-back wins, and who also have just been crowned champions of Egypt once again. Weirdly, unlike other Champions Leagues, this final has 2 legs and they come either side of the Egyptian Cup final we have to play. But let's not get distracted. This is our chance to lift the first Champions League of our Pentagon Challenge in our first attempt. And it couldn't have started any better when we were awarded a penalty and El Tayyib slotted it away perfectly. But Zamalek soon converted a set piece of their own, but with a break down the left-hand side and a well-placed cross, Hassan was at the back post for us to net home a second goal, taking a 2-1 lead into the second leg. 3 days later in the same stadium for the Egyptian Cup final, Issam scored a very late winner for us to win 3-2, keeping the strong form alive. But it's second leg time in the African Champions League final. Zamalek are very much capable of coming to the game today and completely destroying us and crushing our dreams. But we need to stay strong and hopefully come away with the first step of 5 in our Pentagon Challenge journey. And the nerves were settled almost immediately, it seemed, as once again we found a super early goal after just 2 minutes. But after half-time, Zamalek came out flying, and Samson Akinyula, the star man, was lethal. And thanks to a huge defensive mistake again, we gifted Zamalek and Samson an equaliser. Until the 78th minute, where Sam's run down the wing was fantastic, and he put in a pinpoint cross to be tapped in by El Tayyib, who couldn't simply miss. And we are crowned African Champions League winners. And while this is the pinnacle for this second-tier Egyptian club, I am on just step 1 of 5 in my pursuit to become the greatest manager of all time in this Pentagon Challenge.